Brodhead, Wisconsin was founded in 1856 when the Milwaukee and Minnesota Railroad laid track from Janesville to Mineral Point. Brodhead would celebrate its 48th birthday, the year the Wright brothers made their historic flight, and would be 90 years old before it officially had an airport. At the Brodhead Airport, time stands still. This grass field preserves the early days of flight when fearless barnstorming pilots, adorned in skin-tight flight helmets and goggles, owned the skies. I'm Norman Aulabaugh, producer of this documentary concerning the history of the Brodhead Airport. I hope you will enjoy this fascinating story. Bill Earlywine and Wheeler Searles of Brodhead, Wisconsin, were pilots in World War II. Both would return to Brodhead following the war and play a part in establishing the Brodhead Airport. Bill was a student at the University of Wisconsin when the United States entered World War II. Bill volunteered for duty, enlisting as a flying cadet in April 1941. Bill became a heavy bomber pilot, flying a B-24 Liberator. He flew out of any of one of hundreds of small airports scattered throughout England. The great courage of these pilots and their crews was instrumental in bringing the war to an end. Bill Earlywine flew 30 missions as part of the war effort. Today, grass grows through the cracks in the concrete at these abandoned World War II airports, but the grass grows green at Brodhead Airport due to the enthusiasm Bill Earlywine had for aviation. Major Earlywine was discharged in October of 1945. His love of flying led to the establishment of Bill's Air Park on land leased from the Searles estate. The Brodhead Independent Register of 1946 contained many advertisements for Bill's Air Park. Note a sign of the times, a 3-digit telephone number, and passenger flights from $1.50 up. Flight instruction and charter services were offered. For those looking for more adventure, Bill would sometimes print his ad upside down. As noted in the April 11, 1946 Brodhead Independent Register, Bill had a passenger that wanted a stunt flight, but after a few rolls, the passenger had enough, and they returned to conventional flying. Bill became a tailorcraft dealer, selling this airplane for as little as $2,000. He also took on a dealership for the Air Coupe, guaranteed to be spin-proof. Dr. R.W. Stussy used Bill's flying machine equipped with skis to visit patients when deep snows in February of 1947 made it impossible to visit many rural farms. On March 14, 1947, Bill held a meeting at the Knights of Pythias Hall to discuss interest in establishing a municipal airport. Bill would never live to see the results of his dream. On a Monday evening in July 1947, Major William B. Earlywine, aged 27, and his brother Ray Earlywine died of injuries received when the aircraft they were flying crashed in a pasture just a few feet from the airport. Both brothers are buried in Mount Vernon Cemetery in Judah.
Well, now, if you ask me about how the Brodhead Airport got started, you're asking a kind of a big question. First off, getting the airport started involved a lot of people, and for a lot of people was a lot of fun. I can't start out without first telling you about Wheeler Searles and Bill Earlywine. Wheeler Searles and Bill Earlywine were about the same age, and they were buddies, and they both were in World War II, and they were both pilots. And Wheeler was the owner of the airport. Actually, his grandmother was the owner of the property that is now the airport. He Joined the Air Force probably at age 18, and he was down at Pensacola. And Wheeler's father came to my house and said to my dad, Wheeler's in awful trouble. Maybe we're going to have to go down to Pensacola. Wheeler is in the stockade. And when he got his wings, then all the doings was over after getting his wings, and he got in an airplane and started up, flew up in the air, and he flew at all the generals and all the big shots that had been giving him all this grief, and they all had to lay down on the blacktop because he flew that low and scared them. And Wheeler's just in awful trouble. Well, they needed fighter pilots so bad that they didn't keep him in the stockade very long. And he wrote my dad very religiously. We have really a pile of letters. I'm going to read you one of them that I think maybe that you'll like. I'm going to show you. My dad was a soldier in World War I. When Wheeler left, my dad said, Wheeler, take this. This is my .45 from World War I. And that's loaded, and carry it with you. And so Wheeler carried that through the invasion. This letter was written to my dad right at the end of the war in Europe. We were called fighter bombers. We carried bombs and 8 50 caliber machine guns. These are P-38s. These guns really blew the hell out of the Jerry's. It was a little rough at times, Gummy, when the flak got pretty thick. But all in all, it wasn't so bad. Well, I've learned a hell of a lot about flying since I've been over here. And as I say, it was rough. I have a swell car and a motorcycle. I just went up to a German garage and I took them. He was pretty mad, but I had the .45, and he knew I'd use it if he said anything more. The Germans sure hate fighter pilots, and fighter pilots sure hate Germans. Anyway, with the car, I'll see an awful lot of Germany, and I'm going to do some motorcycling too. And then he goes on and says some other things. That's the kind of a person Wheeler was. He came home and he hooked up with his friend Bill Earlywine, and they said, let's start a flying service in 1946. Bill Earlywine was a couple years older and an awfully good businessman. Wheeler was the kind of person that just went and did things, and it usually worked. He's an awful good mechanic, and they started up then Bill's Air Park.
Okay, my name is Jerry Earlywine. My older brother, Bill Earlywine, was the one that was very instrumental in starting the airport in Brodhead. He went to university in 1941, and right after Pearl Harbor, why, he decided he was going to have to go to the Army anyway. He might as well join the Air Corps. So he joined the Air Corps. He eventually ended up in England, flew 50 missions over Europe. When he returned home from the Air Corps, why, he decided he kind of wanted to give rides and provide aerial service right here in Brodhead. Then Bill made arrangements and got the airport rented down there from the Searles family, and he started giving rides and lessons. And he had originally he had Taylorcraft airplanes, and then he had some air coops, and I believe he had a Cessna too, I believe. And anyway, he was given a lot of rides and lessons. And the first year that Rock County had their air show down there, why, he decided to take some of his planes down there. So they took their planes down to Janesville, and when the show was about over, they flew back to Brodhead and lit. And my oldest brother then, Bill, why, he said to my twin brother, he said, well, let's go up and fly around Brodhead and let them know we're back so we can give lessons or rides. And so they took off, and they flew around Brodhead, and when they were coming in for a landing, that's when they were crashed, and my brother, well, both brothers were killed. And the airport almost died out after that, except for a few private individuals that had their own private planes. They kept them there, but as far as an active airport, why, all it was a landing field for them and a place to keep their plane. And he'd really be proud to see it nowadays, where there's about 30-some hangars, I guess, down there. And in the end, it all works out, I guess.
Anyway, Early Wine had dozens of students right after the war. The GI Bill gave a free flight training to returned veterans. And then there was also quite a few merchants that then were middle-aged, I'll say in the 30s or 40s, like Stan Knight, Bill Knight's dad, Larry Ayers' dad, Larry Ayers, Pontiac and Buick, his dad, Ray Lyons, Ed Lyons in the drugstore. Oh, there was many, I can't think of them now. The fellow in the shoe store, those are middle-aged guys, or almost, and they became interested and took flight lessons along with the GI fellas. And that place was really booming. Then in July of 1947, July of 47, the Cole brothers had an air show on in Janesville, and all the guys that hung around the airport went down to it. Bill and his brother flew back early, and the rest of us then drove back, and when we got to the, out south of Brodhead and got to the airport, we saw this activity. And what had happened, no one has ever known, but they dove into the trees on the southwest corner of the airport. Marv Fairman was a student. He didn't go to the air show, and he was just coming over the knoll on the very north side of the airport and saw him disappear into the trees. And it's never been determined what actually happened, whether he was trying to do something that the Cole brothers did or what. But anyway, he lost it into the trees. And immediately the place almost dried up. All the husbands, the wife says, well, I better not take lessons anymore. You might get killed. And a lot of the young sons who were veterans survived, came home, was taking flight lessons. A lot of the mothers put a damper to it, so there was no instructor. So the airport practically died with 4 guys keeping it alive. 3 or 4 different fellows paid the taxes, passed the hat, $20 apiece. Bob Green, Wheeler Searles, later Doc Nelson, the dentist, Jerry Edgar, those few guys in about that time, Don Mason, they passed the hat, paid the taxes. But anyway, that's where the airport started and ended, actually, the activity when Bill Earlywine, the instructor, was killed.
I would like to say that from 1947 to about 1969, there was very little activity at the Brodhead Airport. I don't know if you could even call it a Brodhead Airport. There were people flying. Wheeler, then maybe there'd be Jerry Edgar. There was a while when he flew. Then Don Mason, he had a plane for a while. Then Dr. Nelson had a plane for a while. And they're just sort of very, very marginal use of it. And they'd mow an area. Wheeler would mow an area. Bob Green was Wheeler's friend and classmate, and also a fellow pilot from World War II. Bob Green would bring his tractor out and mow some, and it just sort of they were flying themselves, a few of them. Then, in the very early 70s, Dick Whedon and Bill Knight and quite a number of people became interested in flying, and they formed Chapter 431 of the experimental aircraft.